Two men worked inside the same company. Both were brilliant. One of them sat down and read a single, boring document that everyone else ignored, and saw the largest corporate collapse in American history coming, a full year before it happened. The other man was arguably even smarter, with a better resume and more power, and he used every last bit of that intelligence to talk himself straight into a federal prison cell. Same company, same facts sitting in front of both of them. Two completely different kinds of intelligence, and only one of them keeps you alive. Here's the part that should stop you. The difference between those two men was not IQ. It was a skill, a specific, learnable skill, and by the end of this video, it's going to be yours. In the year 2000, the smartest company in America was Enron. Everyone agreed. Wall Street rated it a screaming buy. Fortune had named it the most innovative company in the country 6 years running. And to doubt Enron was to admit you simply weren't smart enough to understand it. One man doubted it, not because he had inside information, and not because he was smarter than every analyst on Wall Street. He doubted it because he did something almost nobody bothered to do. He read the document. His name is Jim Chanos, and his entire job, running a fund that bets against companies, is to see what everyone else is too excited to notice. While the whole market read Enron's story, Chanos read Enron's 10K, the boring annual filing almost no one opens. And there, in plain sight, he found things that didn't add up. A supposed money machine whose actual return on capital was nearly nothing, cash flow that didn't match the profits, and insiders quietly dumping their own stock. A strange move if you believe the story you're selling everyone else. So he bet against the most admired company in America. Then he made one more move. He pointed a Fortune reporter named Bethany McLean at the same filing. She read it, found the same red flags, and in March 2001 published a quiet article with a devastating title. Is Enron overpriced? Asking the one question nobody powerful wanted asked. How exactly does this company make its money? 8 months later, Enron was bankrupt. Here's what matters. Chanos wasn't psychic. He was dangerously smart. And dangerous intelligence isn't about knowing more facts than other people. It's about seeing what's in front of everyone when everyone else is too dazzled, too busy, or too comfortable to look. That is a skill. It can be built. And today, you're getting the method, the exact habits Chanos was running while the whole market saw a genius, and he saw a corpse that hadn't fallen over yet. This is SciFlow. Today, how to actually become dangerously smart, the real teachable version, and the one trap that turns that gift into the prison cell, so you keep the whole upside and skip the ending. Before the method, one idea, because it's the spine of everything that follows, and it comes from the book everyone blames for cunning and almost no one reads carefully. Around 1513, a Florentine named Niccolò Machiavelli wrote The Prince. It helps to know who he was because it changes how you read him. He wasn't a tyrant handing out tips to other tyrants. He was a civil servant who had spent 14 years running diplomatic missions and watching princes, popes, and warlords up close, taking notes on what actually worked instead of what was supposed to. Then his government fell. The Medici came back, and Machiavelli was arrested, tortured on the rack, and exiled to a small farm. The Prince is what one of the most intelligent observers of power ever wrote after his own intelligence failed to save him. He is not romanticizing the game. He is dissecting the thing that bit him. Chapter 18 contains the most famous animal metaphor in the history of strategy. A ruler, Machiavelli says, has to fight in two ways. Like a man, by the rules, and like a beast, when the rules aren't enough. And the beast isn't one animal, it's two. It is necessary, he writes, to to be a fox to discover the snares, and a lion to terrify the wolves. The internet has taken this and kept exactly half of it. Be the fox, be cunning, outsmart everyone. The entire dangerously smart genre is a remix of the fox. But read the whole sentence, because the whole sentence is the lesson. The lion cannot defend himself against snares. Raw force walks into traps. Fine, everyone quotes that half, but here's the other half. The fox cannot defend himself against wolves. Pure cleverness, with nothing solid behind it, gets eaten. Machiavelli's dangerous mind is not the fox alone. It is the fox and the lion. The perception to see the snare, plus the strength and the soundness to survive being wrong about it. He is telling you, 500 years early, that cunning without robustness is not a superpower. It's bait. Hold on to that, because it gives us the shape of the whole video. First, we build the fox, the 4 skills of seeing what others miss. That's the value, and it's most of what follows. Then we add the lion, the guardrail that keeps your own intelligence from becoming the thing that eats you. Skip either animal, and you are not dangerously smart. You're just dangerous to yourself. Let's build the fox. 4 skills. Each one is a habit you can start running today, and each one is exactly what Chanos was doing when the rest of the world saw a genius company and he saw a corpse that hadn't fallen over yet. Skill 1. Read incentives, not announcements. Here is the single most powerful upgrade you can make to how you see the world. When you want to know what someone will actually do, ignore what they say and look at what they're paid to do. Words are cheap and infinitely flexible. Incentives are gravity. People and companies and institutions bend almost without exception toward what rewards them. And then they build sincere-sounding stories on top to explain it, often believing the stories themselves. Enron's announcement was, "We are a brilliant, innovative company making fortunes in new markets." Enron's incentive, buried in the filing, was different. Executives were structured to hit short-term earnings targets that pumped a stock they were personally selling by the truckload. Chanos didn't argue with the story. He looked at the incentives and asked the only question that matters. If this company is really a money machine, why are the people who know it best quietly cashing out? The story and the incentives pointed in opposite directions. When that happens, the incentives are telling the truth. Every single time. How to practice it, starting today. Every time someone hands you a claim, a recommendation, a pitch, a coworker, a salesman, a headline, a politician, a leader, run one silent question. What is this person rewarded for getting me to believe? You are not assuming they're lying. Most people aren't lying. They have simply convinced themselves of whatever their incentives point toward, which is more dangerous than lying because the sincerity is real. Seeing the incentive lets you predict the behavior before the words even finish arriving. Run this habit for a month and you will feel like you can see around corners. You can. You're just reading the gravity instead of the story everyone else is reading. And here's the deeper move most people miss. Apply it to yourself. The hardest incentive to see is your own. The reason smart people talk themselves into bad decisions is that their own incentives, wanting to look right, wanting the deal to work, wanting to avoid an awkward conversation, quietly bend their analysis, and their intelligence dresses the bend up as logic. The fox who can read everyone else's incentives but not his own is still going to step in a snare. It will just be one he built himself. Skill 2. Go where the attention isn't. Chanos's entire edge was almost embarrassingly simple. He read the 10K. Everyone else read the stock price, the analyst notes, the magazine covers, the loud, polished surface where all the attention already was. He went to the boring, mandatory, unglamorous document where the truth is legally required to live, and where, precisely because it is tedious, almost no one looks. This is a general law, and it's one of the most useful things I can tell you. The edge is never in the place everyone is already looking. By the time information reaches the headline, it has been read, priced in, and dressed up by 100 people before you. Whatever advantage it held is gone. The real signal sits in the place attention avoids because it's dull. The footnote, the fine print, the raw data, the primary source, the thing everybody already knows, so nobody actually checks. Dangerous intelligence is, more than anything, the willingness to be bored on purpose, to go read the actual document while everyone else reacts to the summary of it. How to practice it? In any situation that matters, find the 10K. Buying a house? The inspection report and the seller's disclosures, not the listing photos. Joining a company? How they treat the people who are leaving, not the recruiter's pitch. Evaluating a claim that's all over your feed? The original study, not the article about the study, not the post about the article. Judging a person? What they do when it's inconvenient, not what they say when it's free. Train yourself to ask, where's the unglamorous source everyone is skipping? And then have the discipline to actually open it. Most people won't. They will read the headline, feel informed, and move on. That gap between the people who feel informed and the people who actually checked is, permanently, your edge. Skill 3. Play the move forward, second and third order. Most people stop their thinking at the first consequence. Dangerous minds keep going. They ask not just what happens if I do this, but and then what happens? And then what happens after that? The fox sees the snare because he plays the trap all the way forward in his head before his foot ever moves. It's the difference between, if we cut the price, we'll sell more, first order, obvious, true, and which trains our customers to wait for the discount, which destroys our margins, which forces the next cut, which is the exact death spiral that took down the company in our cold open. Machiavelli's whole method was this kind of forward play. Don't judge a move by how it feels now, judge it by where it lands 3 steps later. Most catastrophes in business, politics, and personal life are first-order decisions that were perfectly sensible right up until the second-order consequence arrived and ate them. The affair that solves tonight's loneliness and detonates the marriage. The loan that fixes this quarter and owns you for 10 years. The clever lie that wins the meeting and becomes the thing you have to defend forever. How to practice it? Before any significant decision, literally say the words, "and then what?" and refuse to stop at the first answer. Push to the third link in the chain. The first consequence is usually obvious and usually fine. The danger and the opportunity both live 2 and 3 moves out, in the territory almost no one bothers to walk to. You do not need a higher IQ to do this. You need the patience to ask one more question after the point where everyone else stops asking. That patience, not raw brain power, is most of what looks like genius from the outside. Skill 4. Run the pre-mortem. See the snare by standing in it. Here is a technique that feels almost like cheating, it works so well. Before you commit to something, don't ask, "Will this work?" Ask the opposite. Imagine it's a year from now, and this has completely blown up. What was the obvious cause? You will be amazed what your own mind already knows the moment you give it permission to hunt for the failure instead of defending the plan. This is how you spot traps before they close. Optimism hides the snare. Deliberately imagining the disaster reveals it, because you stop protecting the decision and start autopsying it. If Enron's board had genuinely run this exercise, assume we are bankrupt in 2 years, what killed us? The answer was sitting right there in the room. Nobody, including us, can clearly explain how we make money. Chanos, in effect, ran the pre-mortem on a company he didn't even work for, from the outside, with public documents, and the snare lit up like a flare. How to practice it? Make it a standing habit before any real commitment. A deal, a hire, a big purchase, a public move, a relationship turn. Spend 5 honest minutes assuming it has already failed and writing down why. Then notice which of those reasons you already half knew and were choosing not to look at. Your intelligence is far better at finding holes when it's hunting for them than when it's guarding a decision you've already fallen in love with. That single reframe, from defending the plan to performing its autopsy in advance, is most of what separates the people who saw it coming from the people who got blindsided by something they could have seen. Skill 5. Separate the real game from the announced game. Every situation has 2 games running at once. The announced game is the one everyone says they're playing. The stated goal, the official agenda, the reason printed on the label. The real game is the one people are actually playing underneath. The status, the security, the turf, the fear, the incentive. Average intelligence plays the announced game and stays permanently confused about why things never go the way the rules say they should. Dangerous intelligence quietly identifies the real game and plays that one. A meeting that is officially about choosing the best vendor may really be about which manager gets the credit. A policy fight that is officially about principle may really be about who controls a budget. Enron's announced game was Innovative Energy Company. The real game, near the end, was keep the stock up just long enough for the insiders to get out. Read the wrong game, and every move surprises you. Read the right one, and people turn predictable. This pairs with one more habit. Read the real power map, not the org chart. The person with the title is not always the person who decides. The quiet veto, the trusted advisor, the one everyone privately checks with before they commit. That's where the real authority sits, and it is almost never exactly where the diagram says it is. The fox finds out who actually decides before he spends a single move trying to persuade the person who merely appears to. How to practice it. In any room that matters, ask 2 silent questions before you act. What game is everyone saying we're playing? And what game are the incentives telling me we're actually playing? And who in this room actually decides, regardless of who is talking the most? You will often discover that the loudest person has the least real power, and that the decision you think you're influencing was quietly made before the meeting even started. Seeing that is the whole difference between performing for the room and moving the one person who actually matters. How the 5 compound. Used once, each of these is a nice trick. Used together as a standing way of moving through the world, they compound into something that genuinely looks like a 6th sense. You read the incentives so you know what people will really do. You go where attention isn't, so you're working from the real document while everyone else argues about the headline. You play the move forward so you see the consequence before it arrives. You run the pre-mortem so the trap lights up before you step in it. And you read the real game beneath the announced one so the room stops being able to surprise you. None of it requires being born brilliant. All of it requires being willing to do the unglamorous thing. Look closer, wait longer, ask once more, that almost everyone else is too dazzled or too rushed to do. That's the fox. That's the skill the original promise was pointing at, and it is completely real. And notice what every one of these 5 habits has in common. Not one of them is a gift you're either born with or not. Each is a decision to look one layer deeper than the people around you are willing to. At the incentive under the announcement, the document under the headline, the third move under the first, the failure under the optimism, the real game under the stated one. That is the quiet, almost unfair truth about dangerous intelligence. Most of it is just refusing to stop looking at the point where everyone else stops. But here is where it gets dangerous, because everything I just handed you is a weapon, and a weapon does not care which direction it's pointed. This is the part the other channels leave out entirely, and it's the whole difference between intelligence that compounds over a lifetime and intelligence that detonates in a single brilliant year. Remember I told you that inside Enron was a second brilliant man? Meet Jeffrey Skilling. Ivy League, top of his class, partner at McKinsey, by every raw measure as intelligent as Chanos and far more credentialed. He was the architect of Enron's whole dazzling model. And he is the cautionary half of this video, because he proves something uncomfortable that the genius worship channels will never say out loud. Raw intelligence is not the safeguard. Past a point, it's the risk. Here's the failure mode, and it's specific. The smarter you are, the better you get at winning arguments. And winning an argument and finding the truth are not the same act. They can be opposite acts. When a brilliant person is challenged, they have two options: treat the challenge as information, or treat it as a problem to be defeated. And the sharper your mind, the more easily you can do the second one. You can construct a flawless, convincing, airtight case for why the person warning you is wrong. Your intelligence makes you better at defending your conclusion than at updating it. That is the trap, and it's almost invisible from the inside, because being uncorrectable feels exactly like being right. Watch Skilling fall into it in a single sentence. On an April 2001 earnings call, the same season Chanos and McLean were reading the same filings and seeing disaster, an analyst pushed Skilling on why Enron couldn't produce a basic balance sheet alongside its earnings. It was the single most important question anyone could ask. It was, almost word for word, the question Chanos had already answered for himself months earlier. Skilling's response, on a recorded call, was to call the man an asshole. Sit with that. The most valuable piece of information in the building, offered for free, and the response of the smartest guy in the room was contempt, not curiosity. The fox who is certain he can't be caught. That is the exact fox that gets eaten. And this is not one man's arrogance. It is a pattern that scales with intelligence, which is what makes it so dangerous. Take long-term capital management, a hedge fund built in the 1990s around two Nobel Prize-winning economists, possibly the highest concentration of raw financial brainpower ever assembled in one firm. Their models were so brilliant, so mathematically beautiful, so trusted, that no one in the room seriously entertained the possibility they could be catastrophically wrong. So they borrowed enormously against them, leverage on the order of 25 to 1. In 1998, the market did the thing the models said was nearly impossible. The fund lost billions in a matter of weeks, and the Federal Reserve had to organize a multi-billion-dollar rescue to stop the collapse from taking the financial system down with it. The intelligence didn't prevent the blindness, it manufactured it. Brilliance is precisely what convinces a room that it doesn't need to check. Now here is the case Machiavelli himself would point to, because he did. The man he holds up in The Prince as the model of intelligent, ruthless, effective power is Cesare Borgia, a warlord who, in just a few years, carved out a state in central Italy through a dazzling mix of cunning and force. Borgia was the fox and the lion in one body. Machiavelli watched him operate in person and was half in love with the technique. By Machiavelli's own account, Borgia did almost everything right, and he still lost it all, because his entire brilliant structure rested on his father, the Pope, staying alive and in power. And when his father died at the worst possible moment, and Borgia himself happened to be gravely ill, a hostile new pope took the throne, and the whole edifice came apart within months. Machiavelli's verdict is the lesson of this entire video. Borgia was not undone by stupidity. He was as capable as a man could be, and he was undone anyway, because he had bet everything on a structure that one stroke of bad fortune could collapse. And his own brilliance was exactly what convinced him that stroke would never land. Even the master fox needs the lion. Even genius needs a margin for the morning it's wrong. There's one more reason intelligence stops getting corrected, and Machiavelli named it 500 years ago too. In chapter 23, the one nobody quotes, he warns the prince about flatterers, the people who tell him what he wants to hear. Here's the cruel mechanism. The smartest, most powerful person in the room is the one it's most expensive to contradict, because they can out-argue you and they hold the power. So rationally, people stop contradicting them. The sharper and more successful you become, the sweeter and more filtered the information you receive, until you're making the biggest decisions of your life on the worst data in the building, surrounded by people who privately know better and have all decided it's not worth the cost of telling you. So here is the bill the Become a Genius videos never put on screen. Past a certain point, intelligence stops getting corrected. You get so good at defeating warnings that people stop bringing them. You build things so complex that no one, eventually including you, can audit them. You confuse clever, can I build this, with wise, should I, and what happens when it breaks? And then you don't fail the way a normal person fails, slowly, cheaply, with time to adjust. You fail all at once, catastrophically, because your intelligence kept reality out right up until the wall. Which is exactly why the fox needs the lion. Here is how you keep the gift without the ending. 4 guardrails. Detach from the sting, keep the data. When a challenge stings, separate the 2 things inside it, the emotional charge and the information. Drop the charge. Refuse to be jerked around by your own ego. But keep the data, especially when it's annoying, because the most useful information in your life almost always arrives disguised as an insult. Skilling felt the sting of that question and threw out the information riding on it. Chanos felt no sting at all because he had trained himself to hunt for exactly that kind of signal. Make this your reflex. Get more curious, not less, the instant something challenges what you believe. The discomfort is the sound of the truth knocking. Protect the one person who'll tell you no. The single most valuable person around any intelligent operator is the one who will say, "You're wrong," and not flinch when you turn the full force of your mind on them. These people are rare. They get rarer the smarter and more successful you become, and your own reflexes are quietly driving them off. So invert the reflex on purpose. When someone corrects you and turns out to be right, reward it visibly. Thank them. Change course in front of everyone. Make it prestigious to catch your mistakes. You are not being humble for its own sake. You are keeping your early warning system alive. And that system is the only thing standing between you and the skilling ending. Ask, "Is this wise?" as a separate question. After you've found the clever solution, stop and run a different question with a different part of your mind. Not, "Does this work?" but "What does this cost? Who does it depend on? And what happens when it breaks?" Make it a literal, separate step every time, because cleverness will not ask it for you. Cleverness is busy admiring the solution. Skilling answered, "Can I build it?" beautifully, and never seriously asked, "And what happens when it breaks?" That gap is the entire distance between a brilliant career and a brilliant catastrophe. Be the lion. Build so that being wrong isn't fatal. This is the deepest one, and it's the half the fox-only crowd never mentions. No matter how sharp your read, assume on purpose that you could be wrong about the very thing you are most certain of, and build so that being wrong doesn't kill you. LTCM bet everything on being right and had no margin for the morning they weren't. Borgia bet everything on one structure with no fallback. Chanos sized his bet so that if he was early or even flat wrong, he survived to bet again. Dangerous intelligence is not certainty. It is perception plus a standing margin for the permanent fact that perception is never perfect. And this is where SciFlow parts ways with every Outsmart Everyone channel on this platform. The goal of all of this is not to become the cleverest person in the room so you can run circles around people. Read the game so you can't be played, including by your own mind, which is the player most likely to play you. Every power move sends a bill, and the bill for intelligence is that it quietly stops listening unless you force it to keep listening. The aim is sovereignty over your own judgment, not domination of every conversation. The fox who only wants to win arguments eventually wins the one argument that puts him in a cell. So let's close the file on the two men, because the entire lesson is sitting in the gap between them. Jeffrey Skilling resigned in August 2001, 6 months into the top job, just before the collapse. Enron filed the largest bankruptcy in American history at the time. In 2006, he was convicted of conspiracy, securities fraud, insider trading, and lying to auditors, and sentenced to 24 years, later reduced to 14. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. Many more lost their savings. He was, to the very end, brilliant. His intelligence was never the problem. What he pointed it at was. Jim Chanos read the same company from the outside with far less information than Skilling had on the inside, and saw the truth that Skilling was spending his genius to hide. He bet against Enron and was right. Bethany McLean asked one honest question in print and started the unraveling of the most admired company in the country. Neither of them was smarter than Skilling in raw horsepower. They were smarter in the only way that actually keeps you alive. They used their intelligence to find what was true instead of to defend what they wanted to be true. That is the whole game, and it's the thing I most want you to carry out of here. Being dangerously smart is not about IQ, and it is not about cunning for its own sake. It's two animals. The fox. Read the incentives. Open the document no one opens. Play the move forward, run the pre-mortem, and you will start seeing snares that everyone around you walks straight into. And the lion. Stay correctable, stay robust, build so that being wrong is survivable, so that your intelligence compounds across a whole life instead of detonating in one spectacular year. The channels selling you genius in 30 minutes hand you the fox and never mention the wolves. They give you the gift and hide the bill. SciFlow's version is the honest one, and it's the only version worth having. Take the entire skill, and take the guardrail that keeps the skill from turning around and devouring the person holding it. Read the footnotes, see the trap, play the move forward, and never ever become so clever that you forget the wolves are real. This was SciFlow. Power keeps receipts. So should you.